I got pregnant before getting married. And Yo-Yo coaxed and deceived me into giving birth to the child. Later, when the debt collectors came to my home, I found out that he had borrowed a usurious loan in my name. My mother was stabbed by the debt collectors while trying to protect me. Blood gushed out continuously. I was heavily pregnant and called for an ambulance. Ridiculously, I didn't even have the money to pay for the ambulance. All the money in my family had been taken by Yo-Yo to gamble. I watched as my mother was taken into the ICU and then wheeled out. After my mother passed away, Yo-Yo, as if he had timed it perfectly, immediately showed up at the hospital. He came to create a disturbance in the hospital. I slapped him, and he kicked me in the stomach. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day he proposed to me. 1. On the school playground. He formed a circle with dozens of white candles bought in bulk. "Lily, marry me. I will take responsibility for you and the baby in your belly," he said. The onlookers were stunned for a moment. And then a burst of cheers broke out. He said shamelessly to himself, "How can you, a woman, having facile wide sigh, raise a child on your own? You don't have a father yourself. And you surely don't want your child to grow up without a complete family. Do you?" He knew very well that I had always been very self-conscious because I came from a single-parent family. In public, he ripped open my wound and showed it to everyone. All bloody. He publicly announced my pregnancy in public, just trying to use public opinion to force me to marry him. Unfortunately, having fulfilled in my previous life, I was extremely infatuated and wouldn't turn back until I hit rock bottom. I just didn't see through his intentions. Last time, I was so touched that I almost lost my mind. The next day, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau with him. Later, I found out that he was so eager to get the marriage certificate with me because it would be convenient for him to take out a loan in my name. Now, looking at that lonely, wilted discounted rose in his hand, I just find it ridiculous. I clenched my fists tightly. I will never let my child have such inferior genes. I'm sorry. Little unborn life in my belly. What child? I'm not pregnant. Are you out of your mind? How could that be? He was anxious and took a step closer. Didn't you tell me? Look at yourself. Do you even have the ability? I shifted my gaze downwards, fixed my eyes on a certain place, and raised an eyebrow. The crowd burst into laughter. Everyone looked in the direction of my gaze. And Yo-Yo's face turned red with anger. I was just playing with you. Look at yourself. Do you think you're worthy of me? I held my head high, as if I had returned to the confident state I was in before I met Yo-Yo. 2. After blocking all his contact information, I resolutely went to the hospital to have an abortion. The doctor in the consulting room was about the same age as my mother. She was very gentle and asked me about my condition. Even after it was time to get off work, she was still holding on to me and giving me instructions on the precautions after the operation. My heart warmed. Her eyebrows and eyes looked somewhat familiar. But I couldn't remember who she was. I was focusing on my phone. When I went out, I bumped into someone. I only heard the guy on the other side muttering words of apology. I glanced at him and stepped aside to make way. I held my phone in my hands, opened it, and then closed it. After much hesitation, I finally dialed that number. "Darling, do you miss Mom?" A familiar yet strange voice came from the phone. In my previous life, even though the thug on the other side was holding a dagger, she still unhesitatingly stood in front of me. Mom is still alive. I still have my mom. It's so wonderful. I suppressed my voice and tried my best not to let Mom notice anything was wrong. "Mom, I miss you." After suppressing my emotions for a long time, I still burst into tears. Mom raised me all by herself. At first, Mom didn't agree with me being with Yo-Yo. But I threatened her with a hunger strike and a fake suicide attempt, and she had no choice but to let me do as I pleased. "Darling, where are you now? Don't do anything stupid. Mom will come and pick you up and take you home," she said. Afraid that she would be worried, I quickly dried my tears and said, "Mom, having fulfilled my obsession. I'm fine. I just want to eat the hairy crabs you cook. I'll go home and have them when I'm on summer vacation. My home is in this city." That's exactly what Yo-Yo was after when he pestered me to pursue me. Unfortunately, he miscalculated. My mom is just a junior nurse. It took her half a lifetime of hard work to become a head nurse. But she couldn't bear to see me suffer. So she gave me much more living expenses than the average college student, making Yo-Yo mistakenly think that my family was very wealthy. Mom asked worriedly, "Did Yo-Yo bully you again?" She was always cautious when mentioning Yo-Yo because he had borrowed a large sum of money from me before. And Mom and I had quarreled many times. I broke up with him. You broke up? She was so excited that she became a bit incoherent. Yeah. I nodded calmly. Although I haven't officially informed Yo-Yo yet, it's just a matter of time. After experiencing what happened in my previous life, I feel sick just at the sight of him. Now, all I want is for my mom and me to live well. But I underestimated him. When I got back to the dormitory, I found that my desk was piled high with clutter. This was normal. After all, I usually hung out with Yo-Yo and hardly ever went back to the dormitory. At first, my roommates tried to persuade me not to be with Yo-Yo, but I only believed Yo-Yo. I told him their words exactly as they were and even mocked them with him on the phone. As time went by, my roommates stopped paying much attention to me. The dormitory was eerily quiet. Surprisingly, no one made sarcastic remarks towards me as they usually did, and I felt a bit strange. My gaze met that of the girl in the adjacent bed. She quickly averted her eyes. There was an awkward atmosphere in the air. The way they looked at me was full of pity. The beep of my phone broke the awkwardness. I clicked on it and saw a pop-up from an unfamiliar chat window. Check the confession wall. 3. The chat started with a friend request. I didn't know this person. I opened the confession wall, half believing and half doubting. Lily from class 21 of the law department. You can choose not to marry me. But the child is innocent. For the sake of being a mistress to an old man, you abandoned your husband and child. How can you be worthy of me? The comments below exploded. Damn it. She knows he's married and still acts as a mistress. Does anyone know this Lily? The father of the child has made such a big fuss. She really shames our law school. I request that the school expel her. Does any of her classmates have a photo of her? I want to see what such a shameless person looks like. The next reply was a swimsuit photo of me lying on my side on the beach. Taken by Yo-Yo. She has a good figure. Too bad she's already a mother of a child. Yo-Yo was offline. The comments were almost all scolding me. They forgot that a single person can't give birth to a child. I was so angry that I was shaking. My roommate, who usually didn't like me, pushed me onto her chair and said tentatively, "Is there some misunderstanding here?" The biggest misunderstanding was that I couldn't see people clearly. I bit my lip tightly. I should have known that Yo-Yo, this blood-sucking leech, wouldn't give up the fat profit that was already in his grasp so easily. My roommate lowered her head to answer a phone call. After hanging up, she looked at me hesitantly and said, "The teacher wants you to go to the office." There was such a big commotion on the campus wall that it quickly made it to the local trending searches. Several neighboring schools all knew about my scandal. When I arrived at the office, both my counselor and the vice dean were there. Yo-Yo stood there with his head bowed. He looked at me pitifully. But I still saw a flash of cunning in his eyes. "Yo-Yo has explained the situation to us. The school's opinion is that you two should get married as soon as possible. We will issue an announcement saying that it was all a misunderstanding," the vice dean said. The vice dean adjusted his glasses. It was obvious that he wanted to smooth things over. "Now that childbearing is being encouraged, the school can consider giving you extra credits to turn this bad thing into a good one. But Lily, you have to treat this boy well. Our school absolutely does not allow the existence of such unhealthy trends as being a mistress." He added, "We originally wanted to expel you. But it was Yo-Yo who pleaded for mercy that we gave you a chance." The vice dean spoke righteously, accusing me without even verifying whether what Yo-Yo said was true. "You say I'm pregnant and a mistress. Do you have any evidence?" I held my head high, swept a glance around the room, and stared intently at the vice dean. "You and I are both studying law. You know that the one who questions bears the burden of proof, right?" The vice dean was taken aback. At this moment, Yo-Yo finally raised his head and said, "I've seen her pregnancy test stick. She is pregnant. Whether she is pregnant or not. Lily, you can just take a pregnancy test on the spot and we'll know." My mind went blank. Just now, the doctor in the hospital clearly told me that within a month after an abortion, the pregnancy test stick would still show 2 lines. Yo-Yo is right. Just take a test and we'll know. Teacher Zhang, go and buy a pregnancy test stick, the vice dean said. The vice dean displayed his partiality to the fullest extent. As if he was being manipulated by Yo-Yo because she had some kind of leverage over him. I nervously clenched my fingers. Everyone in the room stared at me like they were interrogating a criminal. I frantically tried to recall the relevant knowledge taught by the teacher in class. But at that time, I was too busy flirting with Yo-Yo and couldn't remember anything. My mind went blank. My phone rang again. And I instinctively looked at it. It was still the person with the sky blue avatar. Article 1032 of the Civil Code stipulates that a natural person enjoys the right to privacy. No organization or individual may infringe upon the right to privacy of others by means of prying, disturbing, disclosing, or publicizing. Privacy refers to the private life tranquility of a natural person and a private space, private activities, and private information that the natural person does not want others to know. How did he know that I needed this? But I didn't have time to think about it now. I read it out as if I had found a treasure. At the end, I added, in addition, Yo-Yo's slander has had a great impact on my life. I reserve the right to pursue liability. They didn't expect that I, a not-so-studious student, was not a legal illiterate. The vice dean was about to speak again. But I interrupted him. I said you have something on Yo-Yo and that's why you're favoring him. If you disagree, show me the evidence. I said Yo-Yo is infertile. If you disagree, let him get a medical certificate from the hospital. I can also say things without evidence. Does that mean what I say is true, Vice Dean? The Vice Dean rubbed his hands, looking a bit embarrassed. I left the suffocating office without looking back. Hadn't I seen enough of Yo-Yo's shamelessness in my previous life? He was like a leech that couldn't be shaken off once it attached itself, sucking people's blood and eating their flesh. What I didn't expect was that the Vice Dean was also so muddle-headed. I pulled myself together and prepared to go to the library to study. I wanted to catch up on the lessons I had missed, because what just happened reminded me that I was about to be a senior. If I continued to fool around like this, it would be too late. After all, I was originally a hardworking and diligent good student. Which is why I was able to be admitted to the best law school of East China University of Political Science and Law in our local area. It was just that I got entangled with Yo-Yo as soon as I entered the university as a freshman. And that's how I neglected my studies. As for Yo-Yo, at first I thought he was a sports student, because his cultural literacy was even lower than that of a junior high school student. Later, when I found out that he was a senior student majoring in the same subject as me, I was shocked for a long time. In my previous life, Yo-Yo said that studying was useless. And I believed him. Now I just want to make up for the professional knowledge and English proficiency that I have fallen behind in. The weather was just right. As soon as I reached the door, I met Ray, the monitor of our class. He was leaning against the main entrance, with his hands hanging down, looking lost in thought. "Lily? What are you doing here?" He seemed flustered and at a loss when he saw me at the library, and his face turned red all of a sudden. I wasn't really familiar with him. I didn't even know all the classmates in the class. I only talked to him a few more words because he was the monitor. What else can I do here at the library? I was a bit confused. But I still replied politely. Then I turned around and was about to walk into the hall. Just then, my phone rang. It was a call from the neighbor aunt. "Lily, hurry home. Your mother has fainted." 4. I was so anxious that I took a taxi to the hospital. My mother was lying in the ward, unconscious. "What's wrong with my mom?" I asked the neighbor aunt who had brought her to the hospital, completely unaware of the strange look she gave me. Lily, the neighbor aunt who had watched me grow up, looked a bit embarrassed. "I know you young people nowadays are open-minded, but you can't just." The aunt slapped her thigh, looking disappointed. "Anyway, the child is innocent. How can you have the heart to hurt a little wife? This is like killing someone. The child's grandmother came just now and told us everything. You can't be so heartless. You can't just abandon your husband and child after hooking up with a rich second generation. I've watched you grow up, Lily. It's better to be the wife of a poor man than the concubine of a rich man. Don't you understand this truth? When you reach my age, you'll know that none of those who are mistresses end up well. If you dare to do something that's sorry to the child's father, we old neighbors will be the first to not agree. The child's grandmother? I was a bit confused, but soon I remembered that woman. Yojo's mother. She was Yoyo's mother. In my previous life, not only was Yoyo extremely mean to me, but his mother was also a bloodsucker who wouldn't let go once she clung to someone. The mother and son swaggered into my house, drove my mother out of the master bedroom, and bossed her around. My mother was so angry that she moved to the hospital's staff dormitory. I dropped out of school and stayed at home. I was heavily pregnant and cooked 3 meals a day for them every day. If I didn't do something to her satisfaction even a little bit, she would complain about me to Yo-Yo. And Jojo would come home and beat me up. How stupid I was. At that time, I thought that was love. Every time I went to my mother, it was to ask for money. When my mother saw the bruises on the corner of my eye and wanted to call the police for me, I even scolded her ungratefully. I looked at my mother lying on the hospital bed with the ventilator, feeling mixed emotions in my heart. Yojo's mother pasted my indecent photos at the entrance of my residential community. Those were the private photos that Yo-Yo had forced me to take. Under the photos, there were 4 big red characters written, "Pregnant before marriage." When my mother passed by on her way home from work, there were a lot of people gathered around the photos. Yo-Yo's mother pointed at my mother's nose and scolded her for not teaching her daughter well, saying that I was a mistress and was indecent. My mother, who had been gentle and quiet all her life, had a big argument with her. When she was about to tear off the photos, she was so angry that she fainted. Looking at my mother with the ventilator, I secretly clenched my fists. I finally understood that when dealing with someone like Yo-Yo, blindly running away wouldn't work. They were like blood-sucking leeches that would never let go once they latched onto someone. I had to take the initiative and completely cut off their thoughts of sucking my blood. 5. After my mother woke up, I assured her repeatedly before she believed me. But I didn't tell her about my pregnancy. Telling her would only add to her troubles. During her hospitalization, many of her old colleagues and classmates came to visit. Every day, besides receiving the guests, I would sit beside her and recite books. My mother was very happy and would praise me for being studious to everyone. One day, when I carried some fruits into the ward, there was already a guest in the room. "Auntie, have some fruits." I smiled and carried the fruits over. The guest turned around, and my hand trembled, causing an orange to roll down. "Why are you so careless?" my mother complained with a smile. Then she turned to introduce me to the aunt. "This is my daughter. She goes to the same university as your son." I lowered my head guiltily and found an excuse to run out to get some air. The world is really small. The aunt just now was actually the doctor who gave me the abortion. I was both worried that she would recognize me and afraid that she would tell my mother about it when I wasn't there. So I had no choice but to bravely go back in. When I went back, there was one more person in the room. And he looked a bit familiar. "This is my son. You should know him. Right? You two are in the same college." I looked up and met the gaze of that guy. He was about 1.8 meters tall and looked clean and neat. Wasn't this our class monitor, Ray? He looked a lot like his mother, both having a calm and composed temperament. Ignoring the strange looks from others, I pulled him out and demanded, "Your mother didn't say anything bad about me to my mother, did she?" "What bad things?" He scratched his head in confusion, and lowered his head and smiled slightly. "It was actually your mother who asked me to tutor you." As expected, we're mother and daughter. Ray has been the top student in our major for 3 consecutive years. And I was just looking for someone to help me with my studies. In the following days, I went home a few times. The property management of the community clearly stated that they wouldn't allow Yo-Yo's mother to get close to the community anymore. But rumors can be very powerful. When I walked on the road, There were still people pointing at me and talking about me. I didn't care about these at all. After all, having a second chance at life, I know better that I can't satisfy everyone. I just need to care about those who love me. But my mother was about to be discharged from the hospital soon. I was afraid that she would hear some rumors again. So I persuaded her to rent a house near my school to recuperate. After returning to school, I moved back to the dormitory. I bought a cup of milk tea for each of my roommates as an apology. And they all generously said that it's never too late to mend one's ways. Although I received a lot of dirty looks when walking on the round, I had already found my goal. I wanted to take the postgraduate entrance examination. During the 3 years when I was hanging out with Yo-Yo, I had fallen behind a lot. Without good grades and no internship experience, it was simply impossible for me to find a good job. In the library, Ray sat opposite me and supervised my studies. I had a good foundation, so I learned it quickly. With the guidance of Ray, a top student, my studies made great progress. But when I was studying, I always felt that there was a gaze lingering on me. As if it was there but not really there. As soon as I looked up, the gaze would disappear. When I got home, I realized that the place where my mother rented was in the same community as Ray's house. She and Ray's mother were high school classmates. During this sick leave, my mother decided to live closer to her old friend. I was worried for a while. But when I saw that my mother really didn't seem to know anything, I let go of my worried heart. It seemed that Ray's mother really didn't recognize me. I went to class every day as usual and studied in the library. As time went by, the teachers' attitudes towards me also changed. I used to skip classes often and fail exams. It was only because the teachers couldn't bear to that I didn't receive an academic warning. Now I sit in class with my roommates every day, and if I have any questions I don't understand, I run to ask Ray during the break. The teacher cast a look of approval at me in class. She said, "All of you here are future legal professionals." In the first class, I told you that evidence is what we legal professionals should care about the most. An unjust judgment is more harmful than many unjust acts. She looked at me, regarding what happened on the internet in our college some time ago. You should judge it from the perspective of legal professionals and not just follow the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling that the eyes of the whole class were focused on me. My roommate Sunny patted me on the shoulder and whispered in my ear to comfort me, "Actually, we all believe in you. Sure enough, when you work hard for something, the whole world is helping you." I nodded slightly. My eyes filled with tears. It turned out that I had missed so much because of Yo-Yo in my previous life. After class, I declined Sunny's invitation to have a meal and planned to study for a while longer. After everyone had left, Ray came over, holding a thermal bucket in his hand. "Is this for my mom?" I raised an eyebrow. His ears instantly turned red, and his voice was deep. "Yeah. It's for 2 people. Then thank your auntie for me." I made it. The atmosphere was really awkward. I picked up the thermal bucket and was about to leave, but he reached out his hand to stop me. "I found out the things you asked me to check." He looked down at me, and his eyelashes cast a shadow. 6. Ray met a classmate from Yo-Yo's hometown at the summer camp. His classmate said that Yo-Yo had a great reputation in their county's high school. His grades had always been among the best. And it was no surprise that he was admitted to East China University of Political Science and Law. Did you maybe think wrong? That can't be right. Ray and I walked side by side on the path in the school. The warm sunlight shone on me. Ray couldn't even say a complete English sentence. How could he have been admitted to East China University of Political Science and Law? I lowered my head and thought about where things had gone wrong. As if on cue, I bumped into the person I least wanted to see at the moment. Yo-Yo blocked my way. His face twisted. "Great. Lily. We haven't even broken up yet. And you've already hooked up with someone else." His voice was fierce, but his expression looked a bit pitiful. I heard from my roommate Sunny that he was having a really hard time now. Without me giving him the living expenses, he didn't have money to gamble, so he turned to stealing his roommate's electronic devices. But he stubbornly refused to admit that he had stolen them. The Weinstein, in order to smooth things over, threatened his roommates not to call the police. Does he have some kind of life-saving favor with the Weinstein or something? Sunny complained to me as she told me about it. The down-and-out man in front of me looked at me and very warily, Lily, who is he? We haven't broken up yet. Have you forgotten how much you loved me? Lily, please forgive me. I was just muddle-headed for a moment. I did those things because I love you so much and don't want to lose you. Yojo's eyes were a bit red, but I remembered the scenes of me being beaten by him at home in my previous life. I was kneeling on the ground, begging him desperately not to go gambling anymore. But all I got in return was a beating. Sure enough, a man's words are like lies. I frowned. Before I could fight back, Ray pulled me behind him. Classmate Lily said she doesn't like you. You shouldn't harass her anymore in the future. As expected of a bookworm. Even when scolding someone. His words are so gentle. I pushed him away and looked Yoyo straight in the eye, saying, "It's impossible between us ever since you spread rumors about me on the internet. Take a good look at yourself in the mirror and see if you're worthy of me. Lily, it's already my mercy that I'm not calling the police on you now. I was blind to have fallen for you in the first place. Now I'm done with you. Get lost." I grabbed Ray's hand and left without looking back. 7. The college English test, Band 4 was approaching. In my previous life, because Yoyo said the exam was useless, I didn't sign up for it. This also led to the situation that I still hadn't passed it even though I was almost graduating from university. Now I've studied hard for a month. With my previous foundation, I'm very confident about the exam. After the exam, Ray was waiting for me outside the examination room. "How was it?" He took my coat. "I'm pretty sure I'll pass." We both laughed. Sometimes I thought it would be great if he was the first person I met. We chatted and laughed all the way. When we reached the school gate, we met Yojo. He got out of a taxi, followed by his mother. He didn't see us. He was carrying big and small bags, looking reluctant, as if complaining that his mother had embarrassed him. I heard from my classmates that Yoyo had been looking for an internship recently. Many law firms extended an olive branch to him because they knew he was from East China University of Political Science and Law. But he lacked the ability and couldn't endure hardship, so he was fired after only a few days of the internship. His mother heard that her son was working in a big law firm and came here full of joy. Now the two of them could only slink back to the school dormitory. He actually came up with the idea of living with his mother in the boys' dormitory. What a nerve. Ray shook his head and said, "After all, he's someone who was admitted to the law department of East China University of Political Science and Law. If he had put all his heart into studying, he wouldn't have ended up like this." Suddenly, I knew the key piece of information that I had missed before. Send Yoyo's photo to your classmate and ask him if this is what he looks like. I dug out Yoyo's photo from the album's trash bin and sent it to Ray. I stared nervously at the chat box. Soon, let out a low sigh. There was a reply from the other side. No. Then a graduation photo of Yoyo was sent. The person in the photo had a simple crew cut and thick glasses on his nose. Ray and I looked at each other and smiled. This was the real Yoyo. Soon, let out a low sigh. The summer vacation arrived. Y and I traveled a long way to Yoyo's hometown. After many twists and turns, we found the real Yoyo. He was working on a construction site, mixing cement, wearing a vest and under the scorching sun. At a similar age, he'd have matured a lot due to exposure to the wind and sun. We stated our purpose, and he was stunned for a long time. Tears welled up in his dull eyes. I knew it. I knew it. He kept repeating this sentence. Back then, his grades were among the best in his class, but his college entrance examination score was unexpectedly low, not even reaching 200. Yoyo's family was a poor household and didn't have a computer. He asked his classmate Yoyo from the same village to check his grades for him. He didn't believe it and wanted to go to an internet cafe in the town to check, but he encountered a once-in-a-few-years heavy rainstorm. The power and the internet were cut off, trapping him in the village. By the time the rainstorm ended, the application deadline had long passed. Over all these years, didn't you ever suspect anything? Yoyo's father is the village head. Yoyo raised his head, wiped away his tears, and said, "So what if I knew? If my family still wants to live in the village, We can't afford to offend his family. My heart ached. I patted him on the shoulder, not knowing how to comfort him. Perhaps in these 4 years. In the collected dormitory of the construction site. He had also blamed himself countless times for why it was him whose grades were stolen. In the following days, I collected evidence from various sources and basically confirmed that the yo-yo currently at school was an imposter. Ray was so excited that he wanted to go back to school and report it. But I stopped him. Ray was too naive. After so many incidents, he still didn't realize that the school didn't care about the truth at all. They only cared about the school's reputation. Especially the vice dean. We had to come up with a move that could defeat the enemy in one fell swoop and leave no room for a counterattack. I asked Yo-Yo, "Can you wait?" "Wait until we held all the aces in our hands." Yo-Yo pushed up his glasses and nodded firmly. 8. When I returned to school at the start of the semester. Yo-Yo. No, the imposter Yo-Yo blocked me downstairs in the dormitory. "Where have you been for the past 2 months? You didn't answer my calls. And when I went to your house, you weren't there either? My mother, at her age, went to your house to look for you. Don't you know the basic respect for the elderly?" He was wearing a wrinkled leather jacket, and his face had lost its former luster. According to my experience in the previous life, this was exactly the time when he was being chased most urgently by the loan sharks. He glanced at my flat abdomen and said, "Did you have an abortion?" It seemed that he finally got the upper hand. "Give me 100 yuan, and I'll keep this secret for you." I raised my eyebrow and asked, "What if I say no? Does Ray know that you had an abortion for me?" He caught the change in my expression and became even more proud. "It seems he still doesn't know how low-class the woman he likes used to be. You know I have a lot of your private photos. Right?" "Shut up." I raised my arm. But he stopped me. "Ray is coming." He tilted his chin and looked at the figure in the distance. "If you don't want me to tell him, meet me at 8 o'clock tonight at the old place with the money." The old place he mentioned was a 5-star hotel outside the school. I turned on the voice recorder. The fish had taken the bait. 9. I took the 10 yuan I had saved and threw it in his face. He opened the bag, took a look at the amount, and raged. "Are you playing me? Where's the rest of the money?" I spread my hands, indicating that I didn't have any more. "Do you believe that I'll release your photos right now?" I looked at the distorted face in front of me, feeling cold inside. Those photos were all taken when I loved him the most. He said he wanted to capture my most emotional moments so that he could think of me all the time. I put on a pitiful look. "This is all the money I have. However, I can show you a way out." He leaned in closer. I suppressed my nausea and whispered my plan in his ear. "You can go and borrow money from the vice dean. Doesn't he like you a lot? He will definitely lend you a few tens of thousands of yuan. Do you think I'm a fool? I've already been to him. He just bought a house and doesn't have any money at all." He immediately fell silent after saying that. As if afraid of revealing something. He tried to make up for it. "We're just an ordinary teacher-student relationship. Lily. Don't try to play tricks on me." "Is that so?" Last time I passed by the office and heard the vice dean say with my own ears that he made a fortune from stock trading recently. Could it be that I heard it wrong? His face suddenly turned dark. Maybe I was pretending to be too scared now. Or maybe the image of a clingy person I had established in front of him before was too deep-rooted. He believed my words completely. Damn it. He actually dared to lie to me. He left in a huff. And I let out a sigh of relief. In my previous life, after he had squeezed all my money out, he had thought of getting money from the vice dean. Unfortunately, hiding for shite. At that time, the vice dean was already in a high position and had a wide network of contacts. So such threats couldn't affect him at all. But now it was different. The vice dean was preparing for a promotion assessment. Even the slightest hint of trouble could affect his future. The next time I saw Yo-Yo, he seemed like a different person. He no longer lived in the dormitory. He was dressed in luxury brands and was very generous with his money. On the contrary, the vice dean looked like a drained shell, with a few more white hairs. I didn't know if he had made money from stock trading or not. Anyway, it was enough as long as Yo-Yo believed me. Since Yo-Yo believed that he had money, he had to have money. Unless, of course, he didn't care about his position anymore. After that, Yo-Yo's appetite grew bigger and bigger. He not only extorted money from the Weisstein but also threatened him to falsify his academic records at school, packaging himself as an excellent graduate. With the introduction of the vice president, he entered a first-class law firm. Their actions were all seen by the whole student body. It wasn't until Yo-Yo snatched the poor student quota from the department. The annual student grant was 10,000 yuan, and there were 3 quotas in the department. Yo-Yo was greedy and took all of them. Finally, having fulfilled Ryamtsai, he aroused public anger. And the indignant students put him on the local trending searches. He didn't care. Because he knew that the vice dean would still protect him. Unfortunately, having fulfilled May, this time the vice dean couldn't even protect himself. 10. Yo-Yo's appetite was insatiable. Especially after he found that the vice dean could satisfy him more than I could. The vice dean replaced his Mercedes-Benz with a domestic Volkswagen. And his Hermes leather bags were all replaced with affordable briefcases. He looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight. I knew that he couldn't hold on any longer. Just like I couldn't hold on back then. When he came to threaten me to sleep with him using my photos, I laughed. I pressed the stop button on the voice recorder and then dialed the police hotline. I want to report that Yo-Yo, a student of East China University of Political Science and Law, has impersonated someone else to go to school and threat and extorted his ex-girlfriend. When Yo-Yo heard this long and heard name, he was stunned for a moment. Then he tried to grab my phone, but I kicked him to the ground. Because of his gambling and excessive drinking, his body had already been severely damaged. At the police station, the real Yo-Yo was brought in by Ray. He couldn't control his emotions and started punching and kicking Yo-Yo. The police couldn't even hold him back. The real Yo-Yo was so excited that he was exhausted. He sat down on the ground, lost in thought. Looking at the thick calluses on his hands, and the scars from being burned by electric welding, everyone present was deeply moved. He had once sat in the classroom, desperately trying to pull himself out of the quagmire. The imposter Yo-Yo had stole and not only a chance to go to school, but also the only chance for an entire family. He was a thief who had stolen someone else's life. You say I impersonated someone else to go to school. What evidence do you have? He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and still refused to give up. He looked at me fiercely and said proudly, "You're studying law. So you know that everything has to be based on evidence. Right? You can go and check. Go to my hometown and check. If you can find evidence, I'll admit it." I knew why he was so confident. It was thousands of kilometers away from his hometown. And the time it took to investigate the case in a different place was enough for his village head father to fix everything for him. But there was still the vice president. I remembered that the vice president still has a copy of our college entrance examination files. Just take it out and have a look, and everything will be clear. Right? I dialed the phone right in front of him. Yo-Yo didn't realize that his doom was approaching and leaned back in the chair, looking calm. Yes, having fulfilled Laib Sash. If it weren't for his extortion, his dear vice dean would have probably destroyed his files and even made a fake one for him. But now the vice dean came running over with the document bag in a hurry, accompanied by Yo-Yo's despairing howls. While handing the document bag to the policewoman, the vice dean cried bitterly. "I didn't know anything. I made a mistake and let him take advantage of it. Officer, I'll cooperate with whatever you ask me to do. I'll cooperate fully. I remember that when freshmen come to the school, they all have to go through a round of face-to-face review to determine if they are the actual person. However, our vice dean didn't want to deal with such a trivial matter, which is why Yo-Yo managed to take advantage of the loophole. The vice dean is a smart man. He naturally knows that if he exposes Yo-Yo, at most he will only be charged with dereliction of duty. Otherwise, Yo-Yo will cling to him and suck his blood for a lifetime." I handed the voice recorder to the police and then left. The policewoman praised me, saying, "Many girls are too embarrassed to call the police when they are threatened and by such scumbags. In fact, for such things, we must leave them to the police to handle. No normal person will discriminate against the victims. You are really brave. Little sister. Am I brave? In this life, It seems that I have truly been brave once. 11. Zurya was imprisoned and half a year later. He was not convinced and filed successive appeals. But all of them failed. The news about the identity substitution for going to school spread and fermented. And public opinion grew stronger and stronger. More and more schools conducted self-examinations and uncovered many thieves like Yojo. The vice dean was removed from his position. And Yojo was given the opportunity to enroll in school again. Everything is developing in a positive direction. I'm still preparing for the postgrad entrance examination. And Ray has gone to intern at the best law firm in the country. He will come to see me occasionally. Ray asked me what I had seen in Yo-Yo before. I lowered my head and thought for a while. Probably his face. Although his character was not good. He was really good looking. Ray, looking a bit annoyed, turned my chin around. Then am I not good looking? His mother came to see me and brought a lot of delicious food. Only when she was about to leave did she pat me on the shoulder and say that she could accept a daughter-in-law with a rich romantic history. But she didn't want her future daughter-in-law to have had an abortion. After I added Ray's contact information, I knew that he was the mysterious person who had sent me messages that day. I asked him when he started liking me. He widened his eyes and looked at me in disbelief. Lily, you really don't remember me? He put on a wronged expression. I'm your primary school classmate. When I was in primary school, my father passed away. In order to protect myself, my brain almost erased all the memories of that period. Seeing my confusion, he took out the photos on his phone and pointed them out to me. I had an impression. So he was my chubby little desk mate who couldn't take care of himself back then. I looked at the photos and then at Ray. Sure enough, boys change a lot as they grow up. Every fat person has great potential. He pressed me for an answer. I didn't want to reject him personally. So I just asked him. Everything Yo-Yo said is true. I had an abortion for him. Can you accept someone like me? His eyes instantly turned red. And he held my hand carefully. I already knew about it. I just feel sorry for you. On the school playground. He formed a circle with dozens of white candles bought in bulk. Ray, did your mother tell you? I took a deep breath. No. My mother has professional ethics. He grinned widely. The day my mother got off work, I went to her office to find her and happened to run into you. But you didn't seem to recognize me. Ray smiled brightly. As if my unbearable past meant nothing in his eyes. He didn't care. But I couldn't be like that. I rejected Ray. He deserves someone better. And so do I. In my previous life, I dropped out of school to take care of my pregnancy and became a housewife. In this new life, I want to see how far I can go. I want to stand in the courtroom and speak out for more people who have suffered injustice. I want to be a down-to-earth adult and truly make my mother proud. I want to stand side by side with the person I love. Instead of shrinking in his shadow. When my light covers up all the unbearable things. Ray. Let's meet again then.